Hey guys, it's Laura. So you're going to notice some differences in my videos starting in 2025, and I'm going to put this little blurb at the front of several of my videos because I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I definitely pre-record some of my videos and I schedule them out just because I need to be able to do that to manage my work and school and life balance. So I have several videos that are scheduled out for January of 2025 that have my old intro and my old channel name, and I've updated that as of January 1st. So kind of exciting. And I just wanted to kind of give a little explanation, I guess, before each of those videos and just let you know why you might hear me refer to Laura B. Floss Tube and why you may just see just some differences moving forward, especially when the videos later in January and then February and then further on start posting. So anyway, that is what I want to share with you. Welcome to Laura's Handmade Haven. I am so glad that you've joined me. I am still the same girl. I'm still the same crafter and creator. I've just kind of expanded what I do with my channel since I originally named it, and I just wanted my channel name to reflect that. And it definitely, I feel like it definitely opens up opportunities for me to bring in different types of content as we move forward. And I hope you're as excited about that as I am, because I am looking forward to sharing all kinds of crafty goodness with you. So without further ado, let's get started on today's video. Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura B. Floss Tube. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. We're going to start a new series today. We're going to start working on the quilt seed packets from the Mercantile collection. This is a series of patterns put out by Riley Blake. They're using Lori Holt's fabric line Mercantile, and they're her designs as well. So my husband loves me very much, and he purchased all 6 of the patterns for me with the kits from one of the local quilt shops here in Columbia, Missouri. And so I thought, hey, this would be a really cool series to do. I know that many of us have purchased the patterns and then they sit on a shelf and they look cute, but we don't do anything with them. And I actually have another set of quilt seed packets that are doing just that, but he bought me the kits for these, so I kind of need to make them. So the first one I want to work on is this cute little Tea and Notions quilt block, and I have all of my pieces cut out. Now hopefully you watched the video that I did, and I posted it earlier this week or maybe a couple weeks ago on how to make your own alphabet tiles. I used some Shrinky Dink material, and those definitely helped me today when I was cutting out this block. Now I'm going to tell you, there are a ton of pieces for this little block. The block finishes at around 29 by 25, which is a fairly large block. And then I'm going to put all 6 of those blocks together into one quilt to probably hang in my craft room. And much to many of your all's dismay, it will probably be replacing this quilt on the wall for a while at least. So in case anyone is wondering, and in case anyone asks, because I get this question a lot, the quilt behind me hanging on the wall is My Happy Place. It's a design by Lori Holt. I was a sew along on her blog a few years ago, and I just left out the outer borders, or left off the outer borders on this quilt just so it would fit my space. So obviously when I'm putting these blocks together for the Mercantile Quilt Seed Packets, I will be doing the same thing and just making sure the measurement works for the space on my wall. So as I mentioned, I do have all of the pieces cut out, and I'm going to walk you through how I did that, and I'm also going to walk you through the organization to keep all those pieces in place while I'm piecing this block. Now hopefully I get this block pieced in one setting. If not, I am going to have to do a little revision on my organization next time. In fact, now that I'm thinking out loud, I'm like, whoo, why did I not use the design boards that fit into my project tote? Why did I choose my larger boards? But hopefully we'll get this block together in one setting. And now obviously I'm going to try to be very careful not to share any pictures of the pattern, because it is a pattern for sale. And I'm also going to be careful not to share any sizes of pieces that I'm putting together. Again, because that is part of the pattern. So if you want to make this block, you do need to purchase the Quilt Seeds pattern, and this one is Tea and Notions, and I believe it's the first in the series of 6. I'm at least going to say that it's the first in the series of 6. So I have 3 boards of pieces here. They are lettered A through Z, and then double A through a double V. So there are a ton of pieces for this block. And I'm going to be quite honest and tell you that I have not really looked at the pattern. I have not read through it. So I'm going to be working through this at real speed. And I probably will just kind of be quiet a lot of the times, and I'll speed up the video in places where I'm just piecing. But the first thing that we're going to be piecing is the thimble unit. And so I'm going to grab those pieces and come on over to the sewing machine. I'll bring you with me, and I'll share any tips and tricks that I have in just the piecing manner of each of these pieces for the block. I do try to answer most of the questions that I get quite frequently before I start sewing, just so everyone knows what I'm using and kind of my method to the madness, I would say. So I am using a Juki DX7. I love my sewing machine so much. It does have a knee lift on it. I don't use it often, but I do like the Juki DX7. I love the speed at which it sews, and I also just love the power behind it. All right, so I'm just gathering my pieces here for this first little piece of the puzzle for this big block. And the first thing that we have to do is just do some of the stitch and flip method sewing for these little corners. So I'm just grabbing the first little piece of, I'm just grabbing the first couple of pieces, and I'm going to do a stitch and flip for the corner for the top of the thimble. Now I do use a straight stitch on my sewing machine. I do decrease the stitch length down to 2.0. I know some people do even 1.8, and that's perfectly great. I think that 2 is going to be fine. So we just have 2 of these little stitch and flip corners. And now I'm just going to cut these off, leaving a 1/4 of an inch, but that was probably closer to 1/8. And I will press those back and be right back to the sewing machine. Again, I'm not going to give you the measurements or anything like that for the pattern. I will just stop when I have words of wisdom and tell you as we're working through the block. Now you can tell here that I am chain piecing a little bit because I have 4 pieces to put together for this block instead of building on this one piece and just keep going. I chose to kind of do a little chain piecing here. So now I'll just be putting these 2 together, and we'll have our thimble unit together. So I will be giving this a good press, and then we'll be moving on to the seam ripper unit of the block. All right, so I'm going to deviate from what the pattern is telling me to do because they are having us do the stitch and flip corner first and then sew that to this other rectangle. I'm going to sew these rectangles together first. And the reason I'm doing that is because that way I know that I'm going to have a really good, nice point. I guess I can kind of not worry about being as accurate with this method. So again, I'm going to go ahead and sew these 2 rectangles together. I'm going to give them a good press, and now we're going to put on our stitch and flip corner. So if I had done that before, when I sewed it on, it's a very good chance that I may not have had a really good 1/4 inch seam at the top of this little section. But now, since I'm doing it afterwards, I will be sure to have that good 1/4 inch at the top of this rectangle segment for my seam ripper. Grab my scissors again, cut this off. The other advantage is now when I'm bending this back, I don't have as much of a bulk there. I don't have to go and bend all of this. It's just a really nice, even, flat point that I'm bending back. Now we're going to move on to the handle of our seam ripper. And just like that, we have our first little segment of the block together. And this is going to go back to the ironing board for a good press and just to kind of hang out until we're ready for it. All right, so there are 8 pages to the pattern. We're on page 4. Again, I'm just giving that a good finger press. I could take it to the ironing board and press it really quickly, but I think we're going to be all right with just a finger press. You might notice I have some washi tape on my sewing machine extension table, and that is helping me a lot because on all of these stitch and flip corners, I can just line up the corners of my square right here on this line, and I'll be able to sew from point to point without having to mark or fold these squares in half. Now we're just going to trim this down. And give this a good press. And then we'll start working on the handle. Now this handle has a lot of little pieces to it. So what I'm going to do is just kind of lay it out here on my sewing machine table. And that way I know that I have all the pieces that I need. And I know that I will sew them together correctly. So yeah, that's where we're at. And I am missing one. Whoops. Here we go. That looks more like a handle. So I'm going to kind of break this block or this handle piece down a little bit just so I don't have to cut my thread as often. I am going to, what am I going to do here? I'm going to sew these little guys together. And then I can cut this off and sew this piece on. Cut this piece off and sew this one on. Now on the handle, make sure you go opposite directions with those angles or those stitch and flip corners. Otherwise your handle won't be right. I do need to cut this. This could benefit from a good press. Now this might look funky right now, but once you get that seam allowance in there, that will be fine. Now you may have noticed when I was sewing across there, these haven't been pressed yet. But when I was sewing across there, I made sure that this seam here pointed away from me. And then I also made sure right here that I had my stitch right there, because that way when I open this up, I have a really good cup handle point. All right, so there's our little mug. I'm going to give this a good press and it can hang out until we get our next piece together. All right, so we're going to start working on the tulip block, which is actually a really pretty pieced block. It looks like this right here. We're just going to make a 4-patch to begin with, and then we're going to worry about those corners. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep these right here, and I'm going to chain piece these through my machine into the little 4-patch design that I need. So that just means that I know that this needs to go on top, because then when I open up those two pieces, I can just sew them together. So like I said, the right side goes on top. But then we're cutting the other ones off in groups of 2, because then when we flip this open, that's already the 4-patch we need. Now I like to make sure that I'm kind of pressing to the dark. So I'm purposefully flipping these seams in the middle so the one square with the light color is going towards the dark pink. Again, just make sure your edges are straight. Don't forget about that other little 4 patch that we have still hanging out at the back that we didn't cut off earlier. Nesting those seams in the middle. And now we're going to do our stitch and flip corners. I'm going to go ahead and start working on the leaves. I'm going to leave those on there until I'm ready for them. I am very angrily challenged, so I try to make sure that I think through a little bit, and then I also make sure I send my pieces through the machine at the same angle, because that way I can make sure that I have the piece sewn correctly. And sometimes I still mess up. It's always good to flip it back and look at it before you cut it. If you're like me, especially, and you sometimes goof up. Now this one goes this way. And so I'm going to orient my fabric the same way for each one of these that I send through. That way I know the angles are correct, or at least I hope they are. They're either all right or all wrong. I'm really just moving through the pattern at my own pace, and I'm just kind of looking at the next step to see if I can do the next step and not have to cut my thread. That's just really going to help me save a little bit of time, a little bit of thread, and definitely lower the chance of my needle coming unthreaded, which is always kind of, you know, I don't know, it annoys me when my needle comes unthreaded. Now, these are going to be the stems of our flower. So I definitely need to press these back before I can add the other side. All right, and again, I'm going to lay these pieces out on my sewing extension table here, just so I can make sure I have everything in the right place. So here we go with that. I hope it's helping you just to kind of see how I chain piece and how I'm kind of thinking through the pattern as I go. I know that was one of the things when I first started quilting, that it just kind of, I was just like, I don't understand, like, how do you know, how do you break that down? How are you able to manage your block efficiently and not have to cut your thread a million times, and just be able to, you know, make decisions as you're working your way through a pattern. And I definitely will tell you that a lot of that comes with experience and just quilting and sewing in general. And I think some of that comes with just kind of a personality trait as well. A lot of times when I look at, you know, when I look at pretty much anything, I'm like breaking it down in my mind already and thinking, how can I make this easier to get through? How can I speed this up? And break it down into smaller chunks, I guess. And that's definitely, I feel like that's definitely a learned behavior. I feel like anyone can learn to do that, to just kind of look at a big picture and break it down. All right, so this is one point in the pattern that you may think that you did something wrong. I just did, but you did not. So you're going to sew these leaves onto the flower. And I am going to go ahead and cut my thread here. And now this also gets sewn on first. This is why, you know, if you would have laid that out and just looked at it like I just did, then you'd be like, I think I did something wrong. But you did not, you did not, you did not. There is a stitch and flip method coming up for that stem. Now I am going to go ahead and press these open. All right, so now I have all the individual pieces together for this beautiful block. And I thought I would just show you how I go about laying out a block like this for assembly. And what I have done is I've just laid out all the pieces here on my sewing extension table, and I'm going to do the same thing as we did kind of like for the 4-patch, where I'm just going to take these and whatever is on the right or comes, you know, in the middle of the block, that's what I'm going to put on top. And I'm going to sew these together in a way that when I cut it apart, or cut it loose, I guess, from the machine, I'll be able to sew my rows and not have to think as much about what piece goes next. All right, so that's the first 2 rows of the block, or the 2 columns rather, the 3 rows, 2 columns of the block. And now I'm just going to take these and flip them open. And it's a good idea to always check and make sure that it is oriented correctly before you start doing, you know, more. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then I'm just going to keep adding these pieces on to complete my 3 rows of 3 blocks. Or 3 pieces, I guess it's 1 block. And again, just make sure that everything is oriented correctly. Now when I cut this loose from the machine, I have all 3 rows and they're just ready to assemble. So now all I have to do, I don't have to cut those little jump threads or anything. I can just sew my rows together into a block. I do this with pretty much all of my blocks. I'm not a huge presser, and depending on the complexity of the block, sometimes that does bite me. But for the most times I can give it a good spray starch and give it a good press, put it underneath the clapper or a block of wood, and then it will press pretty flat and be fine. So after this seam is together, my block will be together. I am going to take you with me to the ironing board now so we can press this out and get it together. All right, so I just thought I would show you what I've been doing over at the ironing board. I do have a couple of wooden pieces, wooden blocks that I am pressing my blocks out flat, and then a little bit of starch and hot iron, and then we're just going to put these on it and let it sit for a few minutes. And you know, obviously this doesn't cover the whole thing, but it covers quite a bit. So it's going to sit there, and it just kind of helps get the block flat. All All right, so now I'm moving on to this little, I don't know, spool or whatever that is right there. I think it's a bobbin, actually. I'm moving on to the bobbin right there and putting that together. Now, because I don't want to cut my thread, I'm actually looking ahead in the pattern to see what comes next, and we're going to go ahead and start working on the fabric piece that's on that block too. Kind of doing two different things at the same time, just I don't have to cut my thread. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put the center part of this block together, and then I will talk about the border, and then I'll get my border together, and then we will put the whole block together and wrap up. All right, so there are some spacers on the block between different pieces, and let me get some of these out of the way. So when you're looking at the pattern, just know that there are some spacers that you do have to put in there to make everything line up and come out the way that it's intended. So we're just going to work through those first. So the thimble and seam ripper get a little divider on it. And you're really just going to follow the pattern and add the strips that you've cut out to the different pieces. Now on this last little section, you do want to make sure that your fabric is going to line up in this one spot, because that's what's going to make your little fabric remnant. You can stick a pin in that if you want. I'm just not a big pinner. And this is the center of our block. So I'm going to give this a really good press and let it sit over on the ironing board and start working on the scalloped border. Basically the scalloped border, you're just doing the stitch and flip corners, and there's a bunch of them to do. So you have 4 corners, and then you have all those little scallops that go around the sides of the block. So there's 4 of these and then 18 of these. So basically you're just going to do the stitch and flip corners just as we've done on all the other pieces. And then you're going to start putting these chained together. There's some spacer borders that go in here to kind of set that block in a little bit. And yeah, and then you're gonna put the borders on and then put the outer side borders on, and we'll have it together. All right, so here we have it. This is block 1 of 6 for the Mercantile Quilt Seeds patterns. This one went together fairly quickly and easily. I mean, in all honesty, probably with cutting and sewing and pressing and everything, I probably have about 4 hours in this block. There's definitely some things that I am thankful I did. I'm so glad I used all my little alphabet tiles to label all those pieces. I'm glad I went ahead and pre-cut everything just because it made it really easy to put everything together. Yeah, and I'm actually really thankful my husband got me a kit too, because it made it really easy just to stack my fabrics up and cut them out and label them with those little alphabet tiles and just sit down and sew and put everything together. So this is really pretty. I love how the scalloped border turned out. Just followed the pattern. It went together really easily. The finished block size, again, is like 29 by 24. So it's a really good size block. In fact, if you wanted to just take this one block and make it into a wall hanging for your craft space or wherever, it would be a great thing, a great item just on its own. I think that you could also take a few elements from this block and make them into a really cute little project bag or a craft bag. I know some people are really getting into the quilted jackets. This would be a really cool pattern for the back of a quilted jacket. So I'm sure that there are 1,000,002 things that you could think of to do with just the individual little elements from this block. So again, this is the Tea and Notions block. It is part of the Quilt Seeds Mercantile patterns. There are 6 in the series. It's put out by Riley Blake. The fabric is Mercantile by Lori Holt, produced by Riley Blake. So these just makes me smile. Every time I look at this block, it just makes me smile. So I'm looking forward to doing the next one. I hope you are too. In the next video, I will be sharing more tips and tricks on what that block, how to put that block together, and just different things that you might want to change and alter to make its construction easier too. So until next time, I hope you're finding joy in all you do. Carve out some time for crafting and creating, and make sure it's always happy stitching.